The rain had stopped just before dawn. In the soft, silver light of morning, Mara knelt by the garden bed, her fingers buried in damp soil. Something moved between the roots, a flicker of green, trembling, fragile. When she brushed away the leaves, she found it. A tiny lizard, no longer than her thumb, shivering in the chill. Without a second thought, she cupped it in her hands, and the creature opened its eyes. They were not the eyes of a lizard. They glowed faintly, like embers under glass, ancient and knowing. For a moment, Mara felt as though the air itself held its breath. Then the creature let out a faint chirp, almost like a sigh, and curled against her palm. Mara smiled softly, unaware that her life and the world's quiet balance had just begun to shift. From that day on, she called it ashen, for the faint, grey dust that shimmered on its scales in sunlight. The villagers laughed at her, saying it was foolish to raise a garden lizard like a pet. But Ashen was different. It listened, it watched, it learned. Each day it grew faster than the last, its tiny claws sharper, its eyes brighter. And somewhere in the depths of those eyes, a secret burned. One even the heavens seemed to fear. The rain returned that night, tapping gently on the roof as Mara watched Ashen sleep on her windowsill. Its chest rose and fell with a strange rhythm, almost in time with the flickering candlelight. She could swear she felt its heartbeat echo faintly inside her own. Outside, thunder rolled across the hills, but inside her cottage, there was peace. Mara didn't know it yet, but the bond was already being written, in blood, in soul, in fate. In the following days, Ashen followed her everywhere. To the garden, the well, even to the edge of the woods. It perched on her shoulder, chirping softly as though telling stories she couldn't understand. Sometimes, its gaze would drift toward the sky, longing, searching, remembering something distant. Mara laughed at the idea, calling it her little philosopher. But even laughter couldn't hide the feeling that something greater stirred behind those molten eyes. On the 7th night, she woke to a soft glow under her bed. Ashen's body shimmered, scales glinting like polished metal beneath its skin. She reached out, her hand trembling, and felt warmth, like a heartbeat of the earth itself. The glow dimmed as Ashen sighed, curling closer to her. Sleep came again, but Mara dreamed of wings unfolding behind her house. Spring came gently that year, and the earth bloomed in colors too bright to name. Ashen spent its mornings chasing butterflies and its evenings sleeping under the banyan tree. Mara often sat nearby, mending clothes, humming tunes her mother once sang. But sometimes she would catch Ashen staring toward the horizon, where mountains pierced the sky. And each time, her heart tightened without reason. One afternoon, she noticed something strange. Ashen's shadow no longer matched its body. When it stretched in the sun, the shadow's wings unfurled, vast and silent, though its back remained bare. Mara blinked, thinking it was a trick of the light, but the air itself shimmered faintly around them. Something old and powerful was waking beneath her garden. That night, she whispered, "What are you, little one?" Ashen tilted its head, eyes glowing faintly gold. It crawled into her lap and rested its head on her palm. When it sighed, a faint curl of smoke escaped its tiny nostrils. Mara froze. The air tasted faintly of iron and ash. By summer, Ashen had grown too large to sleep indoors. It rested now beneath the banyan tree, its tail coiling around the roots like living rope. Villagers who passed by whispered of omens, saying the woman kept a cursed creature. Mara ignored them, feeding Ashen fish and fruit, speaking to it like a friend. The creature listened, blinking slowly, like it understood every word. Sometimes, when storms gathered, Mara would hear low rumbles from Ashen's chest. Not growls. Something deeper, older, like the earth answering the thunder. The sound comforted her, even when lightning split the sky. She began to wonder if perhaps the creature wasn't cursed at all, but chosen for her, and her alone. One night, the wind carried voices from the hills. They called her name softly, sweetly, voices that were not human. Ashen raised its head, eyes burning bright, a soft growl vibrating the ground. Mara reached for it, but the sound vanished as quickly as it came, and when silence fell, she knew the world beyond her garden had started to stir. The morning after the storm, the banyan's roots were blackened. Mara found Ashen sitting beneath it, smoke curling from its mouth. A ring of scorched earth surrounded the creature, perfect, precise, deliberate. She didn't speak, only knelt and touched the ground, still warm to the touch. Ashen lowered its head, ashamed, as though it understood it had revealed too much. That night, she brought it a bowl of water and said softly, "It's all right." Ashen looked at her for a long time before dipping its snout into the bowl. Its reflection shimmered, changing, scales turning silver, wings faintly visible beneath the surface. Mara's breath caught, but she smiled anyway. "Whatever you are," she whispered, "you're mine now." Ashen pressed its head against her chest, the air trembling around them. A faint spark passed between their hearts, one human, one wild. The bond sealed itself quietly, like a secret vow under moonlight. The stars blinked awake above the hills, as if witnessing an ancient promise reborn. And from far away, something vast and unseen took notice. Rumors spread faster than wildfire. A farmer claimed he saw Mara's beast breathe fire at dawn. By evening, the village elder sent men to speak with her, carrying spears and fear in their eyes. Mara stood at her gate, Ashen, hidden behind the banyan's roots. She smiled politely, but her heart hammered like war drums. They asked questions she couldn't answer, about the flames, the smoke, the shaking ground. She said it was only a lizard, strange but harmless. One man spat and muttered that devils come in small forms first. When they left, Mara locked the door and leaned against it, shaking. Ashen crept to her side, resting its head against her leg. That night, she didn't sleep. Ashen lay awake too, watching the stars through the window. In its eyes, reflections of fire danced like distant memories. For the first time, Mara wondered, had she saved a creature of wonder or of ruin? And yet, she couldn't bring herself to send it away. By autumn, Ashen could no longer hide. Its wings had begun to unfold, delicate at first, then vast and powerful. When the morning sun touched them, they shimmered like glass dipped in gold. Mara wept, from awe, from fear, from the weight of knowing. The creature she loved was no longer of her world. Ashen tested its wings in the garden, stirring dust and petals with every movement. The wind it made smelled of storms and freedom. Mara stood nearby, smiling through tears, whispering, "You were never meant to stay small." Ashen turned to her, unsure, as though torn between sky and soil. And for the first time, Mara understood what love that lets go might mean. That night, she dreamed of flying. She saw her cottage as a speck beneath clouds, her hands reaching toward endless light. Ashen flew beside her, eyes filled with joy. But when she looked again, it was alone, circling a mountain peak, roaring into an empty sky. Mara woke up crying, though she didn't know why. Ashen's fire came with the first frost. Mara watched as it breathed warmth into the dying garden, saving her crops. The snow melted wherever its breath touched, leaving green life in its wake. The villagers called it witchcraft, but Mara called it a miracle. Her dragon, though she still whispered that word in secret, had given her the sun. Ashen began to speak in gestures and sounds she could almost understand. It bowed when she offered food, rumbled when she sang. Sometimes it looked at her with such sorrow that she wondered if it remembered another world, a kingdom of clouds and flame, perhaps, where it once belonged. But in her arms, it found peace, a small, fleeting eternity. When Mara fell ill that winter, Ashen refused to leave her side. Its heat warmed her through the fever and the cold. She woke one morning to find it curled around her bed like a living hearth. "Thank you," she whispered, brushing its snout. Ashen blinked slowly, and for the first time, a tear fell from its eye. Snow melted early that year. Ashen began pacing restlessly, staring toward the north, toward the misty mountains. Something ancient was calling it, a whisper in the wind it could no longer ignore. Mara watched in silence, her heart sinking with every restless breath. Love, she realized, sometimes means setting the wild free. She spent the next days preparing for goodbye, cooking Ashen's favorite meals, humming its lullabies, smiling through the ache. When she brushed its scales, they hummed faintly, resonating with a power beyond her world. Ashen leaned close, sensing her sorrow, but not understanding it fully. It nuzzled her cheek as if saying, "Why are you sad, when I am still here?" On the last morning, the wind carried snow again, though the sky was clear. Mara opened her door, and Ashen spread its wings wide for the first time. The ground trembled as it took flight, circling once over her cottage. Mara raised her hand, smiling, and as it vanished into the horizon, she whispered, "Fly home, my heart." Days became months. The banyan's leaves withered without Ashen's warmth. Mara tended the garden anyway, speaking aloud to no one, pretending it could still hear her. Every night, she lit a lantern by the window, in case her dragon ever found its way back. But the skies remained empty. She grew older, slower, her hands trembling when she touched the soil. The villagers forgot their fear and simply called her the Old Keeper. Sometimes, children came to hear her stories of the lizard that grew wings. She told them gently, her voice soft as smoke. It wasn't a monster. It was a miracle. And when they laughed, she smiled, because she knew what they never could. One evening, a shadow passed across the moon. She looked up, heart pounding, but saw nothing more than clouds. Still, she whispered, "Ashen," and for a fleeting second, the air shimmered with the faint scent of lightning. Her eyes filled with tears. She smiled through them. A decade passed before the mountains trembled again. One dawn, the sky split with fire, gold and silver burning across the horizon. The villagers fled in terror, thinking judgment had come. But Mara, frail and white-haired, stepped into her garden with calm eyes. She knew that sound. She knew that light. Ashen descended through the clouds, vast beyond imagining. Its wings shadowed the valley. Its roar shook the heavens themselves. When it landed, the ground bowed under its weight. Yet its eyes were the same, soft loving, remembering. The dragon lowered its head until it touched her shoulder. Mara pressed her palm to its snout, smiling through tears. "My little one," she whispered, "you came back." Ashen rumbled, curling its body protectively around her once more. In that moment, woman and dragon were no longer divided by form or fate. They were home, together again, under the same eternal sky. Ashen stayed for days, circling her cottage like a guardian of old. Its eyes glowed softly at night, casting warm light through her window. The villagers, once fearful, now bowed in reverence when they saw it. They whispered that the old woman must be a witch or a saint. But Mara only smiled. She was neither. She was simply loved. Ashen brought her gifts, rare stones, feathers from distant lands, and once, a silver flower. She placed them all in a wooden chest, each one a fragment of their shared life. At night, she spoke softly, telling stories of the world Ashen had never seen before. The dragon listened with quiet devotion, breathing gently so as not to disturb her. The fire between them burned brighter than time itself, yet sometimes when Mara slept, Ashen would fly to the mountain peaks. It would stare into the darkness, roaring silently, as if remembering another realm. a realm it once belonged to, and could never return from. Each time it came back to her side, it bowed its head in quiet surrender. For her, it chose the earth over the sky. Winter returned, and Mara's strength began to fade. She moved slower, her breath shallower, her laughter softer. Ashen tried to warm the cottage with its breath, careful not to burn the wood. When she coughed, it pressed its snout close to her chest, listening to the weak rhythm within, and every time she smiled at it, the dragon's heart ached a little more. One evening, as snow fell thick outside, she asked, "Ashen, will you remember me?" The dragon tilted its head, unsure what death meant to a creature of flame. Mara reached out, tracing a line along its jaw. "When I'm gone," she whispered, "fly for me. Don't stay chained to my grave." Ashen closed its eyes, letting out a low, trembling growl that sounded almost like grief. That night, as the storm howled, Ashen lay curled around her cottage. Its warmth kept the snow from touching her roof. The fire in its chest dimmed, but never died. It dreamed of fields, of laughter, of her hands brushing its scales. Dreams of a love that even the cold could not steal away. When the storm ended, Mara was weaker than before. She sat by the window, watching the river swell with melted snow. Ashen lay nearby, guarding her as though she were a queen. Sometimes she spoke softly, her voice thin as smoke. "Do you ever wonder why you came to me?" she asked. Ashen lifted its gaze, golden eyes glowing in answer. Perhaps it didn't know, or perhaps the answer was too sacred to say. It only nudged her hand gently, as though reminding her she was never alone. Mara laughed weakly, whispering, "Then let it be enough." The river outside carried the sound of her words away, like prayers on water. That evening, villagers saw a strange mist rising from the forest. It shaped itself like wings, vast and bright, before fading into the night. They said it was an omen, but of what? No one could tell. Mara, watching from her chair, only smiled knowingly. She knew the world was listening. Spring returned for the final time in her life. The banyan, once scorched, now bloomed with golden leaves. Ashen's warmth had brought the garden to life again, even as Mara's body weakened. She spent her mornings among the flowers, speaking softly to them. Sometimes she imagined they listened, and perhaps they did. Ashen followed her closely, careful not to crush the blossoms. The dragon's movements had grown slower, gentler, almost reverent. It knew she was fading, though it didn't understand why hearts must stop beating. Each night it rested outside her door, watching over her shadow through the window. The stars above seemed dimmer when it blinked. On her last good day, Mara wove a garland of white lilies. She placed it gently on Ashen's head and whispered, "For my king of the wild sky." The dragon lowered its head, trembling under the weight of the fragile crown. Tears fell, steaming where they touched its scales. In her laughter that day, even death paused to listen. The next dawn came quietly, wrapped in mist and birdsong. Ashen waited by her door, expecting her voice, her steps, her gentle hum. But the cottage stayed still. It pushed open the wooden door and found her sitting in her chair, eyes closed, lips smiling faintly. The air smelled of lilies and rain. For a long while, Ashen didn't move. It lowered its head to her lap, nuzzling her hand, waiting for her to wake. When she didn't, the dragon let out a sound the world had never heard before, a roar of sorrow and love. The ground shook, trees bent, and even the wind wept. The mountains echoed its grief for miles. By noon, the villagers came, trembling. They found the dragon still beside her, unmoving, guarding her body with silent devotion. No one dared to approach, and when night fell, Ashen lifted her gently, wrapping her in its wings. Together, they vanished into the mountains. Far beyond the village, Ashen found a cave of crystal and stone. There, it laid her upon a bed of flowers, her hands folded over her heart. The dragon lit a circle of blue fire around her, flames that did not burn, only shone. It bowed its head low, touching its snout to her forehead. A single tear fell, turning to glass where it landed. For 3 days, the dragon did not move. Its wings covered her like a shroud, keeping away the cold. When it finally rose, its roar shook the peaks, calling the heavens to witness. Then with one breath, it sealed the cave entrance with fire and stone. The smoke rose into the sky, forming a fleeting shape, a woman's face smiling down. The villagers later saw that light and spoke of miracles. They built a shrine at the mountain's base, calling it the Tomb of the Flame Keeper. Pilgrims came for years, leaving flowers and candles at its gate. But no one ever saw Ashen again. They said it flew into the clouds, chasing her spirit beyond the sun. Ashen roamed the skies for centuries, or perhaps days. Time had lost meaning without her heartbeat beside its own. It flew over oceans, deserts, and ruined kingdoms, searching for a sound it would never hear again. Sometimes it thought it saw her shadow in the wind, her smile in the rain, but when it reached out, there was only silence. The dragon began to light fires across the world, not to destroy, but to remember. Each blaze burned in the shape of a flower, each spark whispering her name. People called it the Wandering Flame, believing it to be a divine messenger. They didn't know it was simply a creature mourning love. Its grief became legend, its devotion became prayer. On one lonely night, it landed by a river under the stars. In its reflection, it saw not a beast, but her, eyes kind, smile endless. Ashen closed its wings and whispered softly in the tongue of flame, "If love made me, then love will unmake me." And with that, it wept for the first time in 100 years. Generations passed. The world changed, but the mountain where she rested remained untouched. Each spring, flowers bloomed in impossible colors around the sealed cave. The villagers said it was the dragon's doing, its way of visiting her once more. They never saw it, but at night, the sky glowed faintly with gold. One year, a child climbed the mountain and found a single scale in the grass. It shimmered with soft warmth, humming like a heartbeat. When he brought it home, his village's crops flourished for a season. They said the spirit of the dragon had blessed them. In truth, it was only love, still echoing through time. From that day, the people began to sing songs for the Flame Keeper. They told their children that love could bridge worlds, human and divine alike. And somewhere above the clouds, a great shadow stirred. Ashen listened to the voices of the living once again, and for the first time in ages, it smiled. Ashen had become one with the wind. Its wings no longer beat, yet storms moved at its will. When lightning struck, it was said the dragon was weeping for joy. When dawn broke, the glow on the horizon was its heart. The world had forgotten its true name, but not its song. Sometimes, when the air grew still, wanderers claimed to hear whispers, a woman's voice, gentle and warm, calling softly to a dragon unseen, and far away, thunder answered like a heartbeat in reply. No one knew where the sound came from, only that it carried peace, the kind of peace found only in reunion, and so the tale became legend, then myth, then prayer, but deep beyond the clouds, where no mortal eye could see, they remained, a woman and her dragon, side by side, watching over the world below, her hand upon its snout, his wings wrapped around her light. Together, they guarded the dawn forever. Centuries later, travelers still visit the mountain of the Flame Keeper. They say that when the wind blows just right, you can hear two heartbeats in the air, one human, one wild, beating together, steady, eternal, a love beyond time, beyond death, beyond reason. The banyan still grows by the old cottage, roots curling deep into the soil. Every spring, its leaves shimmer faintly with silver dust. Children play beneath it, laughing, unaware of the story buried in its shade. Yet sometimes, when night falls, the wind moves through the branches like wings, and the laughter sounds almost like her voice. The story of Mara and Ashen endures, not in books, but in hearts. It reminds all who hear it that kindness can change the fate of even dragons, that love can outlast the body, the earth, even the stars. And somewhere, beyond the veil of worlds, a dragon still dreams of a garden in bloom. A place where a woman's voice calls softly, "Welcome home, my little one." Centuries passed, and kingdoms rose and fell beneath the mountain's shadow. One spring morning, a girl was born in the valley, her eyes bright as molten gold. The midwife whispered that her heartbeat pulsed in strange rhythm, 2 beats in one breath. They named her Lyra, meaning Song of the Stars. From her first cry, thunder rolled faintly across the distant peaks. Lyra grew fast, wild, and curious. She spoke to birds, to rivers, to the whispering wind. When she walked beneath the banyan, its leaves shimmered faintly, like greeting an old friend. Her grandmother told her the tale of Mara and Ashen. Lyra listened, silent, yet tears filled her eyes, without knowing why. One night, she dreamed of fire raining from the sky. Through the blaze, a massive shadow descended, its voice deep as thunder. It called her by name, not the one given by her parents, but an ancient one, forgotten by men. When she woke, her hands were warm, glowing faintly in the dark, and the old banyan trembled, shedding its silver leaves. Lyra began to see what others could not. Flames whispered secrets to her, rivers hummed lullabies when she passed. She told no one, afraid of being called cursed or mad, but deep down, she felt a longing. Something ancient calling her home, the same call that once drew a dragon from the mountains. One evening, the wind carried a strange song, a deep, rumbling tone that stirred her bones and burned her heart. She followed it beyond the village, through forests and forgotten paths. There, on the horizon, the mountain stood, veiled in mist and light. The air around it pulsed with warmth, alive and watching. When she stepped onto the old path, the ground seemed to hum beneath her feet. Tiny sparks danced in the air, gathering around her hands. She remembered her grandmother's words, "Love does not die. It transforms a shadow passed across the sun, vast and silent." And Lyra's heart whispered, "You've come back to me?" The climb was endless, but Lyra felt no pain. Each step brought visions, flashes of a woman tending a garden, a tiny lizard glowing in her palm. She heard laughter, soft as the wind, and a roar that felt like a promise. By the time she reached the summit, night had fallen and stars burned brighter than ever before. There, before her, was the sealed cave of the Flamekeeper. The entrance shimmered with faint blue fire, cold yet welcoming. As Lyra approached, the flames bent away, parting like curtains before her. Inside, the air was heavy with warmth and ancient memory. A single crystal stood at the center, pulsing faintly with light. When she touched it, the mountain itself seemed to sigh. From within the crystal, a voice spoke, gentle, eternal. "Do not fear the fire, child. It remembers you." Lyra's breath caught. The sound was both strange and familiar. Then another voice joined it, deep, resonant, filled with sorrow and love, and though she had never met them, she whispered, "Mara, Ashen." Light poured through the cave like dawn breaking open the world. Lyra fell to her knees as warmth flooded her body, a heartbeat merging with her own. Visions struck her, wings unfurling, flames swirling, 2 souls intertwined across time. When the light faded, the crystal cracked, releasing a faint gust of smoke. It curled around her, forming a shape that made her tremble, a dragon's shadow. The spirit of Ashen coiled before her, glowing like starlit fire. It looked at her, not as a stranger, but as something remembered. "Mara's heart lives within you," it whispered, its voice echoing in her soul. Lyra reached out, her fingers brushing the smoke. A spark leapt from her hand, and the dragon's shadow solidified, shimmering and alive. In that instant, she understood. She was the bridge, human and wild, bound by an ancient promise. Ashen bowed before her, and when she placed her hand on its snout, the bond ignited once more. The mountain roared, rivers glowed, and the stars above seemed to bow in silence. The Flamekeeper had returned, not as one, but as 2 reborn. At sunrise, Lyra rode upon Ashen's back, soaring into skies untouched by mortals. The wind sang through her hair. The dragon's wings thundered like the beating of worlds. Below them, valleys turned gold, oceans shimmered like molten mirrors. Lyra laughed, a sound so pure that the clouds themselves parted to hear. Ashen roared in answer, the sound echoing through heaven and earth alike. For the first time in centuries, the world remembered its guardian. Crops flourished, storms gentled, and sickness faded from the valleys below. People looked to the skies and wept at the sight of fire made kind again. Some prayed, others simply watched, feeling their hearts stir with forgotten hope. Love, it seemed, had returned in winged form. When night came, Lyra and Ashen rested upon a cliff of glass-like stone. The stars mirrored in Ashen's scales like constellations reborn. Lyra touched one gently, whispering, "Do you remember her?" The dragon rumbled softly, smoke curling into the shape of a woman's face, and Lyra knew then that love, even reborn, never forgets its first home. News of the dragon's return spread like wildfire. Some saw salvation, others saw threat. A nearby kingdom sent soldiers to the valley, seeking to claim the beast of flame. Lyra warned them to stay away, but greed deafened their ears. Steel met sky, and the storm began. Ashen roared once, and the world trembled. The soldiers' torches blew out, their arrows turned to ash midair. But Lyra, weeping, begged Ashen to stop. "This is not vengeance," she cried. "This is not what she would want." The dragon froze, wings quivering, remembering Mara's voice through time. When silence fell, the army retreated, broken not by fire, but by mercy. Lyra fell to her knees, exhausted, her heart heavy with sorrow. Ashen lowered its head, resting its snout beside her hand. Together they watched the sunrise paint the battlefield gold, and Lyra whispered, "Let the world learn love before it learns fear." Lyra began to sing to the wind, songs she did not remember learning. Each melody stirred flame and light from the air itself. Ashen listened, eyes gleaming with pride and reverence. Together, their song healed lands, mended storms, and awakened forests. The people called her the Fire Singer, child of the eternal dragon. Wherever they flew, life followed, but with light comes shadow, and envy brewed in distant hearts. A king far away, hearing the tale, sought to capture her power. He sent sorcerers to bind the flame and cage the sky. Their greed would awaken something even they could not control. When the traps were set, the earth darkened. Chains of black magic rose from the ground, striking Ashen mid-flight. Lyra screamed, her song shattering into sparks. The dragon roared, flames clashing against shadow. And in that moment, the world stood at the edge of ruin. The sorcerer's chains coiled around Ashen's wings, pulling it from the sky. Lyra fell with it, crashing into the forest below. Pain burned through her body, but her spirit blazed stronger than fear. She crawled to Ashen's side, whispering, "You will not fall." Not again. The dragon's breath came ragged, its light dimming. Darkness crept across the clearing, cold, alive, hungry. The sorcerers approached, cloaked in malice and greed. "Give us your gift, child," one hissed. "The fire does not belong to you?" Lyra rose, shaking, her hands blazing with light. "It was never mine," she said. "It was love's." Then she began to sing again. The melody shook the chains, cracking them with every note. Ashen stirred, fire returning to its eyes. Together they rose, woman and dragon, flame and soul united once more. When the last chain shattered, the night itself bowed to their light. The battle ended with dawn breaking through the smoke. Ashen stood tall again, wings gleaming with gold fire. The sorcerers were gone, not destroyed, but purified into light. Lyra's song lingered in the air, echoing through valleys and hearts alike. The world awoke softer that day. In the stillness that followed, Lyra collapsed in Ashen's shadow. Her strength was spent, but her eyes glowed with peace. Ashen lowered its head, guarding her as it once did Mara, and for a fleeting moment, past and present blurred into one. Two souls, old and new, became whole again. When she woke, she found herself wrapped in warmth, surrounded by flowers. Ashen's gaze met hers, proud, eternal, full of love. "You are her," it whispered, though no voice was heard. Lyra smiled softly. "And you never stopped waiting?" Together, they watched the sun rise, reborn in its first light. Years passed, but Lyra and Ashen never aged. They became guardians of the earth, protectors of flame and life alike. Pilgrims journeyed from afar to glimpse them, symbols of balance and hope. No kingdom dared raise arms against another while they soared above. Peace, long forgotten, had returned to the world. Every spring, they visited the mountain of the Flame Keeper. The blue fire still burned there, eternal as love itself. Lyra would kneel and whisper, "We kept your promise, Mara?" Ashen would bow beside her, its wings folding in reverence, and the mountain would bloom again, no matter the season. When the wind blew just right, two voices filled the air, one ancient, one new, singing in harmony. The villagers said it was the sound of heaven listening to earth, but those who knew the legend understood. It was love speaking through time, a love reborn, remembered, and forever kept. 100 years passed, and still Lyra and Ashen soared. Wars became stories, and greed faded like smoke before dawn. Wherever they flew, the world bloomed in their wake. Rivers healed, forests grew, hearts softened. Children who looked up to the sky saw not fear, but wonder. And for the first time, the world remembered what peace could sound like. Lyra built no kingdom, claimed no crown. Her only throne was the saddle of fire upon Ashen's back. Together, they tended the balance between storm and sun. The people called them the Keepers of Dawn, the Guardians of Harmony. But Lyra only whispered, "We are just keeping a promise." At night they returned to the mountain where everything began. Ashen's breath warmed the stones. Lyra sang the old lullabies of Mara. Sometimes, in the flicker of firelight, she thought she saw her ancestor smiling beside her. Two women, two hearts, one flame eternal. The circle of love, unbroken. But nothing lasts unchanged, not even light. As centuries folded into each other, Lyra began to fade. Her hands glowed less, her voice softened to whispers of fire. Ashen noticed first, its eyes wide with ancient sorrow. It had seen this once before, and it knew what was coming. Lyra felt no fear, only calm. "I was never meant to live forever," she said, resting a hand on its scales. "The fire passes on. That's how it endures." Ashen pressed its head to her shoulder, trembling beneath the truth. Even immortality could not bear losing love twice. On her final flight, they soared above clouds as red as wine. Lyra laughed into the wind, her hair blazing with the last light of her gift. Below them, the world shone bright, healed, alive, whole. When her laughter faded, Ashen roared once more to the heavens, and the sky answered with a rain of golden stars. They returned to the mountain one last time. Lyra, weak but smiling, touched the old banyan tree. Its bark shimmered under her fingers, humming softly in response. Ashen lay beside her, wings folded like mourning veils. Even the air seemed to weep. "I understand her now," Lyra whispered. "Mara, your first heart." Ashen's eyes glowed, and in them danced two faces. Mara and Lyra intertwined. "Love," Lyra continued, "is not ours to keep. It keeps us." Her body trembled, her fire flickered. The dragon nuzzled her cheek, humming a low, aching lullaby. As the sun rose, Lyra exhaled one final breath of flame. It drifted into the sky, forming the shape of wings. Ashen roared in grief, the mountains echoing for miles. Then, as it had done once before, it carried her body into the clouds. Two stories, one sorrow, repeating through eternity. When Lyra was gone, Ashen did not return to the skies. Instead, it circled the world once, scattering pieces of her fire into the wind. Those sparks fell into hearts, rivers, and forests, becoming warmth wherever they landed. From that day, every living thing carried a trace of her light. Even in darkness, the earth glowed faintly with memory. The dragon's fire dimmed, but its purpose grew. It flew to every place Mara and Lyra had loved, the garden, the river, the mountain. In each, it left a single ember that would never die. The world called them the eternal fires. To Ashen, they were tombs of love, gentle and sacred. When its final journey ended, Ashen landed atop the mountain once more. It lay beside the banyan tree, folding its wings like petals. Its heart beat slower, steadier, softer. In the distance, thunder murmured like a heartbeat fading into silence. And then the dragon slept, for the first and final time. 1,000 years passed, and still Ashen slept. The banyan grew around it, roots wrapping the dragon like tender arms. Moss covered its scales, turning gold in sunlight. From its resting breath rose the mist that fed rivers below, and from its tears grew flowers that never withered. The people forgot its name, but they remembered its gifts. Villages thrived near its mountain, warmed by unseen fire. Priests sang hymns of gratitude, unaware they were praying to love itself. The old cave became a temple, its flames eternal as ever, and the legend of the Flame Keeper passed quietly into myth. Yet sometimes, travelers swore the mountain sighed. They heard a heartbeat in the wind, slow and steady. 2 beats, one human, one wild, woven through time. Those who listened long enough wept without knowing why. For love, even buried, still speaks. In time, the descendants of Lyra's village became wanderers of flame. They learned to sing to the wind, to coax warmth from cold soil. They called themselves the Children of Fire, keepers of the dragon's blessing. Wherever they walked, flowers bloomed even in winter's frost. They carried no weapons, only light. They built shrines across the lands, each with a single candle that never went out. Pilgrims came to light torches from those flames, carrying them home in reverence. "May love guide your path," the firekeepers would say. For them, flame was not destruction, it was devotion. The memory of Mara, Lyra, and Ashen lived through their hands, and so, unknowingly, the dragon's wish was fulfilled. The fire that once belonged to one heart now burned in many. It was no longer a creature, but a legacy, a reminder that warmth could conquer even death, that love, once given, belongs to all. Centuries turned the mountain into myth and the myth into song. The Children of Fire became scattered, their words diluted by time. Kings ruled again, and the old ways were forgotten. Yet even in the age of steel and smoke, strange warmth lingered in the air. The mountain never froze, not even in the cruelest winter. One night, miners digging deep into its roots struck something vast and metallic. They unearthed a wing, golden, petrified, immense. Panic swept through the kingdom, but so did wonder. Scholars declared it the fossil of a god. Only one old priest whispered, "No, that is love-made stone." The wing pulsed once, faintly. Dust rose like breath from the cracks. Some swore they saw the mountain's eyes open, just for a moment. But when they looked again, there was only mist, and the sound, faint, distant, of a dragon sighing in sleep. Millennia later, the world burned in wars again. Cities fell, seas turned black, and hope faded like dying embers. But amid the ruin, a small flame survived, one candle lit in an old mountain shrine. A child found it, shivering and alone, and carried it through the storm. That single light spread across the broken world like sunrise reborn. The people gathered again beneath the banyan's shadow. They told the story of Mara, Lyra, and the dragon who loved too deeply. And when they lit their torches, the wind carried a soft rumbling song. Ashen's spirit stirred in the mountain once more, awakened by memory. Its fire burned again, not to destroy, but to heal. The child who saved the flame looked up at the stars that night. She swore she saw wings of gold shimmering in the clouds, A voice whispered through the air, gentle and timeless, "You've kept the promise," and the world, at last, began to mend. The flame spread across nations, uniting them in light. No ruler claimed it, no war could extinguish it. People began calling it ashen fire, the breath of mercy. Wherever it burned, sickness faded and peace took root. The legend had become a living force once again. Temples rose, not to gods, but to memory. In every one stood two statues, a woman and a dragon, side by side. Between them burned a single eternal flame. It never wavered, even through storms or time itself. Pilgrims came not to pray, but to feel the warmth of love reborn. And when the wind howled across the world, it carried a familiar sound, the beat of two hearts, distant, eternal, intertwined. Every soul who heard it felt their chest ache and their eyes fill, because somewhere deep down they remembered, and remembering was enough. The story of Mara and Ashen became the story of the world itself, no longer two souls, but the fire in every sunrise, every heart that dares to love. Some say the stars are the embers of the dragon's wings. Others believe every warm wind carries her laughter still. But all agree, the flame never truly died. High above the clouds, beyond sight and sound, they wait together. Her hand upon his snout, his wings curved protectively around her light. They watch new worlds form, new hearts awaken, new loves bloom. For them, time is only another word for forever, and in that forever, they are home. If you listen closely when dawn breaks, truly listen, you might hear it too. Two heartbeats in the wind, one human, one wild, still beating in perfect harmony, still whispering the promise, love never ends,